What's up, guys? Today we have a clip of Michael Knowles completely destroying a Democratic congressman. Well, I don't know if it is a man, but let's just say a congressman, and another lying leftist on Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Not only do I feel comfortable, I'm happy to see that the federal government is stepping in where the local and state governments have failed. This is one of the main things that the federal government is for. The Insurrection Act has been invoked many times throughout American history by both parties. Eisenhower, Kennedy. It's been called in by, it's been requested rather by Democrat governors. And so that's really unsurprising. And what we're looking at here is issue compounding on issue, because we've had this massive invasion of foreign nationals, many of whom are working with foreign terrorist organizations, the criminal cartels that control the southern border. We have crime spiraling out of control generally in places like Chicago, which in terms of the number of murders leads the country. Something like 110,000 gang members in Chicago alone. And you're seeing an uptick in political violence, particularly from the left, reflected in multiple surveys and then obviously in the horrific incidents that we've seen recently. Most recently, the leftist who was going to bomb the cathedral in Washington, D.C., but of course, going back to Charlie's assassination and others. So you're having a lot of disorder. This is why we have the Insurrection Act. It's why we have the federal government, because I think people are debating between these two false options. Either we can all sit together and sing Kumbaya and nobody can enforce the law, or we're going to have violence. But that's not really the case. The two options you have are you can have just, prudent state violence, that is to say, cops enforcing the law and putting the bad guys in jail, or you can have what you're seeing increasingly celebrated by the left, which is vigilante violence, which is unjust. And I want the just kind. I want an orderly society, and I don't think we should just consign people who happen to live in failed blue cities to misery and rape and murder and all the rest of it.
Okay, Sri Tanada, your response to that?
Well, look, militarization of our cities is not the answer. Just yesterday, a mother who's in America for 30 years, she was going to a grocery store to buy some ingredients so she can make meatball soup for her kids. And ISIS detained her. She's now behind in the ICE detention center. I saw her daughter crying. These are not gang members. These are not hardened criminals. They're arresting 17-year-old high school kids, putting away American citizens, 5-year-old American citizens, kids who are suffering from leukemia in the ICE detention center, losing their doctor's appointments. You can talk all about gang members.
Sir, what am I watching? This is actually much more disturbing than I thought it would be. I'm sorry, guys.
You know, nobody...
I wouldn't talk about that. Just to stop you there, but I want to talk specifically about the deployment of federal troops, not necessarily the wider separate issue of what ICE is doing with undocumented people in the United States. I've debated that a lot. We can touch on that in a moment, but just specifically on the deployment of federal troops in states which are not DC, where obviously the federal government can do that. The president has that power. There is this raging argument now about whether it is constitutional, whether it is lawful for the president of the United States to do what Trump is now rolling out in places like Chicago. What is your view of that?
It's not only not legal, it's not only unconstitutional, but more importantly, it's not even good business, because this costs so much, putting federal troops in cities. Instead of that, if federal government can give the grants so that local police, law enforcement can hire more people. Right now, they are severely understaffed. They don't have the resources they need to keep our cities safe. Now, in a long-term process...
But aren't you answering your question? I mean, aren't you answering
I think you're
the
making
question?
the point.
Right. I mean, in a way, what you just said is the rationale for doing it, isn't it? I mean, they're under-resourced. No. They don't have enough people. They can't control the crime. Donald Trump is recognizing this, and he's doing something about it. And I'm curious about how many regular Americans who live in some of these very crime-ridden inner cities in America are really as opposed to it as you sound like you are. Because, if you've got a lot of crime going on around you and the police are woefully under-resourced, why would you object to seeing some troops on the streets to just try and restore order and perhaps send a real message to criminals?
See, putting military and reserves all over America, major American cities, and militarization of our country is not the solution. The solution is empower the local law enforcement, give them the funds that they need. It's the funding that needs to come so we can have a more long-term, long-lasting solution to it.
Congressman, are you familiar with the Insurrection Act?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And this so what do you think that's for? You said that this was illegal. You said it was not unconstitutional and illegal for the federal government to send National Guard into cities and states. What do you think the Insurrection Act is for?
Well, look, this is a issue that the local government should be handling. What is the answer to
I don't think you understand the Insurrection Act.
Right, to Michael's... well, let me just ask, Congressman, do you actually know what the Insurrection Act says?
Yes, but this is...
hang on. What does it say?
Well, look, what we saw happen in January 6th in the Congress, that's insurrection.
That's not the question. The question is, are you familiar? Obviously, the government is citing the Insurrection Act as the empowerment to do what it's doing. Are you familiar with what the Insurrection Act allows?
Yes, I am. But look, this president has used all kinds of excuses to break the law. This president has used...
No, but that is the law. So what is the law, Congressman? You say you're familiar with the Insurrection Act, but you don't seem to be able to describe what it does, and you're actually contradicting it. So what do you think the Insurrection Act does?
Look, the issue here is that we need our cities safe. Americans want...
Well, Congressman, with all due respect, that's not an answer to the question. I mean,
Michael, can you lay out what you believe allows Donald Trump to act so unlawfully?
Hang on. Jack, I'm going to come to you very shortly. But just to be clear, Congressman, it's a pretty simple question that Michael posed, which is the government are citing the Insurrection Act as the rationale and the legal tool by which they can do what they're doing. You said it's illegal and wrong and they shouldn't be doing it, but you seem to be struggling to explain what the Insurrection Act actually is. And Michael, quite rightly, is saying, well, can you just tell us?
Well, whatever it is, when the National Guards are picking up trash and the National Guards are watering the flowers, that is not Insurrection Act, and that's not what this is meant to be.
But do you know what it is, the act?
Yeah.
What is it?
When there is an insurrection, the government has powers to use military, use reserves to address those situations. And this is clearly not the situation here. What we need to do is empower local law enforcement.
Okay, Michael, your response to that?
Yeah, I think the congressman might be a little bit confused because he said that the federal government is breaking the law by sending the National Guard in to restore order to the cities where crime has spiraled out of control, where there's obviously a violation of federal law with all of the illegal aliens running about, and that is actually what it's for. We have a federal government in order to step in when the local and state governments fail. And so this has been used many, many times, not merely to restore order if there's some violent revolution, but even, for instance, to desegregate schools. This has been used many, many times over the course of American history. There's nothing illegal about it. And in fact, what President Trump is doing right now is one of the clearest and most just uses of the Insurrection Act when you have cities that are failing, that in your own words, cannot enforce the law, are under-resourced, and are falling into disorder. So I think you've made a good argument for what President Trump is doing.
Okay.
Look what he's doing.
Well, let me bring in Jack. I want to bring in Jack. He's been waiting patiently. I mean, Jack, it seemed to me the congressman actually, maybe inadvertently, gave the explanation for why Trump feels justified in using the Insurrection Act. Because if you agree that the law enforcement in these very crime-ridden cities is failing and under-resourced, then why shouldn't the government use the Insurrection Act to put troops on the ground and try and restore proper order?
Well, because I don't think the intention is to restore proper order. Donald Trump and his entire administration has made it clear that they'd be happy to see unrest come out of sending in the National Guard. That's what they wanted out of their attack on LA. That's what they wanted to happen in D.C. Donald Trump sees this as an opportunity to intimidate people. It's come out directly of the administration that they think it is a win if they go into Portland and nothing happens, but nothing is happening. It's people in T-Rex Halloween costumes who are getting maced for simply exercising their First Amendment right, which, Michael, I thought you cared about. It doesn't really seem like that's the case. But they've also said...
Yeah, it's not like they're protesting every day, blocking streets, blocking people, destroying the city, looting businesses, and attacking police officers. It's just peaceful protesters. Especially, we know the left is never violent, right?
That from? Hold on. Before you make you made an argument.
I think if you would allow me to finish my point,
the Trump administration wants disorder and has admitted this. What's your evidence?
You don't like to hear people speak out, and now I'm delivering a point that you don't seem to like, and you want to silence me. That's what this administration does. It's okay. You don't have the power to do that today.
Now, Jack, to be clear, you made a statement that the Trump administration actively wanted disorder, and Michael, I think, understandably, because I would ask the same thing. Where is the evidence?
It has been reported.
Where is the evidence that they wanted disorder?
It has been reported that this administration sees it as a win if unrest comes out of the deployment. It came out of Axios, that they see it as a win if there is unrest because of these deployments, because they want to say, look at this hellscape in Portland, when all of the photos that I've seen are just like people in T-Rex costumes hanging out and going to the farmer's market. And if you really want to deploy the National Guard, Mike Johnson's district could certainly use it. These failing red states. If you want to talk about states that are failing, red states are failing. They need to be subsidized by California and New York, Massachusetts. These states, these Republican states that are being run into the ground, if you're talking about people who need aid and assistance, they're suckling off of California. It has nothing to do with the crime-ridden, failing blue states. It's a non-issue. And this politics of subtraction.
You think there's no crime in Chicago?
1 second, Michael.
You think Chicago's doing all right?
This politics of subtraction, where you think if you just take away and take away and take away and we'll eventually hit a bottom, it just doesn't actually exist as a real theory. If you thought that law enforcement was the answer to this problem, Donald Trump wouldn't be cutting the budget of police across the country to the tune of billions of dollars. Like, that wouldn't be happening. So you don't really have a
increase the law enforcement budget.
First of all, that's not true, which is what just took place in his budget.
He did. That was the big beautiful bill. That was one of the key provisions.
Untrue. That is absolutely untrue. So you don't even have this like cogent theory of policing or law enforcement that you want to see carried out.
Your argument is that the big beautiful bill did not increase law enforcement funding at the federal level.
Donald Trump has cut again in a
Congressman, could you please clarify for our confused liberal friend here?
Yeah, we need to have a long-term solution to this, and that is only by reinforcing our local law enforcement. That's what we need to do.
Did the big beautiful bill increase federal law enforcement funding?
Again, the point, Congressman, is whether in the big beautiful bill there was an increase or a decrease in federal spending for law enforcement. Which one was it?
Well, there was an increase, but look.
Okay, so then again, I come back to Jack. So Jack, your fellow left winger on the panel has just contradicted you and said, well, hang on, Congressman. Hang on.
Yeah.
Jack, you've just heard there from a Democratic congressman that the big, beautiful bill actually increased federal spending on law enforcement, the opposite of what you just said.
I think he's misspeaking. Donald Trump has done nothing to increase police budgets.
He's misspeaking.
Donald Trump doesn't really care.
I don't think he's
in
misspeaking.
Congress.
I think one person's misspeaking here, and it may be you.
It's not. There's nothing that Donald Trump has done to actually, 1 second, there's nothing that Donald Trump, the supposed back the blue guy, has done to support police in this country. He doesn't actually care. It's a gimmick. It's a game. Michael, I know you're familiar with that. It's fine. But Donald Trump doesn't care. If he did, he wouldn't have pardoned 1,500 cop-beating insurrectionists to go out and reoffend and refund. If you want to talk about crime in this country and who's being let loose on the streets, I think Donald Trump is allowing that to happen more than any other single person in this country. So I don't really know how you could make the case that this administration cares about policing, cares about crime, cares about law enforcement, when every action that they have publicly taken and celebrated is to the opposite of that argument, Michael.
Yeah, I guess there are very few things that Democrat congressmen and I agree on, but what Congress just did in President Trump's big, beautiful bill would happen to be one of them, and it's that he's increased federal law enforcement funding. So, I don't know where your confusion comes from, but it's manifest.
Well, I don't know how you're confused about Donald Trump's attacks on police officers across the country and his disregard for those who were attacked on January 6th.
Jack, look, to be clear, he either increased federal spending in that bill on law enforcement or he didn't. And it does appear from Michael and from the Democratic congressman that you're just wrong. So do you want to take an opportunity to maybe walk that back?
I
a
do
big
not,
chunk
no.
of that was ICE.
Well,
Big
you'd
chunk of
rather
that
double
was
down
ICE.
on a falsehood.
I'd say I think that I'm willing to double down on the fact that Donald Trump has made it difficult for police officers across this country to do their jobs, and he doesn't actually care about them.
Right, and would you be prepared to stake your entire professional reputation on the fact that he slashed federal spending on law enforcement in the budget?
Would I be willing to stake my entire reputation on the fact that Donald Trump has made it more difficult for law enforcement to do their
But
jobs?
you made a
That
very
wasn't the
sweeping
question.
statement. This is the problem, you see. It's very easy to say Donald Trump has slashed federal spending on law enforcement. But if it turns out, as is the case, that it was the opposite and he's increased spending in his big, beautiful bill on federal spending on law enforcement, you should just have the good grace to go, I was wrong.
Well, I think if Michael is saying that there is not enough police spending and we need to send in,
he just said
we need to send in
Trump
and
increased the
militarize these
federal
cities.
spend.
But I think the point is clear here, and it's one that we need to argue, which is whether or not Donald Trump has done anything to actually aid law enforcement, or if he's done anything
if he increased
to tackle
spending,
crime.
you would say that that is a good thing for the law.
Dude, your people fight law enforcement. What are we talking about? Like, I stayed silent because I wanted these guys to have a debate, but the leftists hate police officers across all nations. And yes, Donald Trump did increase the budget for police officers. This guy is pathetic.
Law enforcement, right?
I would say that Donald Trump's plans aren't coherent and don't make some cogent argument. Michael certainly doesn't make some cogent argument of how Donald Trump, who has let crime run free with his policies and within his administration, actually cares about responding to crime, when those who have had the most success aren't the governors of red states, but are the mayors of blue cities that Michael wants to claim are crime infested and being run into the ground. We have seen in DC, we have seen in Chicago, we have seen in Baltimore drops of historic lows in crime, like lower than we've seen in decades now. And I don't know why you won't acknowledge that or maybe learn from some of those Democratic mayors.
Bro, you can just admit you made a false claim on air. It's okay. People make false claims. We could just move on. But you can't, you're doubling down on a easily disproven
when
claim
even the
that you made.
Democratic congressman says you're wrong.
Maybe that's what you've
You're
made your
wrong.
living doing, doubling down
Let
on
me
false
speak for
claims.
myself. Let me speak for myself. What Donald Trump has done is this is all political. He's picked cities that are Democratic leaning. These are many of these cities. Chicago, the crime is actually declining. If you look at the numbers in Detroit, for example,
The crime in
declining.
Chicago is horrific. I had a son there at the university for a year. It is a dangerous city full of serious crime and a lot of murder.
Yeah, this was insane, guys. I don't even know what to say about that thing and the leftists. I mean, these people just lie for a living. But guys, let me know in the comments what you think. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to. Christ is King, and God bless you.